Well, it's my pleasure to interview Dr. Peter Salowey, and you are recognized as one of the world experts in the field. But rather than me introduce you, Dr. Salowey, can I get you to tell me a little bit about, for the 4 people on the planet who don't know who you are, who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Peter Salowey, and I'm a professor of psychology at Yale University, where I also serve as the Dean of Yale College. And I've been there for many years now, I think more than about 25 on the faculty. And I was a graduate student in psychology at Yale, and before that an undergraduate at Stanford.
Okay.
And in 1990, Jack Mayer and I published a paper called Emotional Intelligence. And I think that was the first systematic use of the term and laying out of a model of emotional intelligence that then has gone in many different directions with input from many different people.
Okay. And I still hear every once in a while, well, what is it and why should it matter? It's that soft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond? Or do you even get that question anymore?
Oh, I get that question. I think part of it, partly we get that question because there's a kind of inconsistency in the way people use the term emotional intelligence. It's often linked to anything that someone thinks is important, for example, in the workplace or in schools, that isn't measured by traditional IQ or ability measures. And so the term emotional intelligence gets mapped onto many different things. We much prefer using emotional intelligence to describe a set of skills having to do with perceiving, understanding, managing, and using emotions.
Okay.
And when we focus on those skills, I think the reaction we get to it is, oh, that makes sense to me.
Right.
That sounds important, rather than this is all just soft stuff.
And I'm interested, I went on your website, on the Yale website, and read that you're doing research on the psychological significance and function of human moods and emotions and understanding how they affect health protectives. So things like, how do they affect people who are infected with HIV, if I'm understanding it correctly, or how does it affect people who are going through cancer treatments, or the conditions that actually existed to perhaps create those poor health conditions?
Mm-hmm. So we're very interested in, even before we started writing about emotional intelligence per se, we're very interested in arousing emotions in our laboratory and then looking at how people in different emotional states behave.
Okay.
So what do they pay attention to? What can they remember? How do they reason? How do they make decisions? How do they interact with other people? Are they more or less willing to be helpful? How do they make friends, form relationships, everything having to do with the impact of emotions on other psychological processes.
Okay.
And our goal was really to show that although emotions occasionally make other processes worse, often they can improve decision-making, reasoning, creativity, help us with memory, help us pay attention to what's important. And so when we say that the functions of human emotions, the idea is why do we have an emotional system, and how does it help us, rather than how does it get in the way. We now are doing a lot of work on health communication and what emotions are the best to arouse when trying to get someone to think about ways to prevent cancer, ways to prevent HIV/AIDS. Sometimes you could arouse fear or guilt or joy or pride, and under different circumstances, different emotions are going to matter more or less. We focused a lot on when is it better to present the upside versus the downside, the positive consequences of doing a behavior versus the negative consequences of not doing it.
So would be an example, if I was trying to convince women to go for breast screening exams,
right.
do I tell them that, do you want to leave your children orphans, which would be more fear-based,
Exactly.
or This is good because it's a preventative measure and you're doing something healthy.
Well, that's exactly what we test, and it turns
Okay.
so behaviors that are more screening-oriented, like mammography,
Right.
tend to people are more persuaded to do them when you focus on the downside, it turns out.
Oh, okay.
Behaviors that are more preventative, like eating fruits and vegetables, not smoking, using sunblock at the beach, tend to be better promoted with positive messages, with upside
Okay.
messages.
And does it
basic.
change with ages? So I'm thinking of if I'm trying to convince teenagers not to smoke,
Yeah.
what is the best message for that? And is
We haven't seen too many age differences, but then we haven't looked at it so systematically. I know
Okay.
with adolescent smoking cessation as well as adult smoking cessation, positive messages work better. That might also be because you hear they're different.
right.
So you know that smoking causes lung cancer, but what you might not know is that quitting smoking will give you more energy, make you run faster, jump higher, perform better athletically,
Okay.
and that sort of stuff. That's a more unusual message, and that might be why it's effective.
And, having been a teenager who smoked, I know the reason that I did it was because I thought it made me look older and more desirable to
Right.
boys.
Right, and so
So if you have to appeal, if you have to know obviously the emotions of the people that you're dealing with as well.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. It's all contextualized.
So I kind of was going to ask, and then I think we've answered, what are the different applications for studying this?
Yeah, so we've looked at emotional intelligence and tried to measure these skills and do interventions
Okay.
in schools. Right now we have a variety of projects with middle school students,
Okay.
in adults, in the workplace, but also in family life. And so we believe that that emotional intelligence are a set of skills that are teachable and learnable. And if you learn them, you can perform more adaptively, more functionally in all of those domains.
Okay. And that, I know that it has been kind of controversial. Are emotional skills something that can be learned? And from what I'm hearing from you is you believe that they can be.
I absolutely believe they can be. There is certainly a genetic component to all this, temperament, the tendency, for example, to approach things that are novel versus feel more fear and anxiety.
Right.
That has a strong genetic component, but that doesn't mean that the skills involved in emotional intelligence, understanding somebody else's emotions, your own emotions, using language to describe them, regulating your own emotion, that those can't be learned.
Okay.
So the genetics may give us a starting point, but then there's an awful lot of learning that we do anyway through our lifetime, and that we can do
Right.
explicitly through an intervention program.
And I've heard the term, brain plasticity, especially when it applies to children.
Yeah, the brain is always changing. We didn't realize this until the last 10, 15 years, that the environment and our environmental change, learning, all is changing the function of areas of the brain. We can regenerate neurons. We can parts of the brain can switch in their functionality when there's damage. In other words, there can be compensation or compensatory brain function. So all of this suggests that nothing is set in stone in this area.
What do you believe is the biggest contribution your work has been on the world, and what is your legacy?
Well, it would seem presumptuous to answer that question directly, given that I'm hoping to do this for another 20, 25 years.
Well, I'm hoping so too.
But I think we've tried to present a model of what emotional intelligence is that is straightforward, simple, easy to use, easy to understand, that is concrete, that provides a set of skills. It's not just anything good. It's an explicit set of skills.
Right.
I think also our measure, the Mesquite, is still, unfortunately, the only measure of emotional intelligence that actually measures skills rather than judgments of other people or self-report judgments in assessing emotional intelligence. And we continue to look at what that measure predicts. in lots of different domains and to publish in the scientific literature. And so I'm hoping we can continue to put some scientific meat on the bones of emotional intelligence, and in that way help practitioners and educators and people in human resources management do their jobs better.
Okay. I told you a little bit that I'm studying emotions and trust, and you had said that it wasn't something that you were working on right now, but you're the expert, and I'd love your opinion.
Yeah, so
where you see the connection.
So emotions and trust. I mean, what makes somebody trustworthy? And right. And I think one of the important elements in all this is the ability to empathize. So if I'm someone who can attend to your emotions, empathize with them, embody them, reflect them back to you, that may create the sense that I'm someone who can be trusted. Now, it's an open question whether, in fact, I can be trusted. But I have a feeling that's the building blocks for it. Would you really want to trust someone who didn't look like they were tuned into your emotions at all, couldn't take your perspective, couldn't imagine what you go through? That would seem to be the kind of person that you wouldn't trust.
Yeah, and I think at the very basis, if someone cares about me, then that, I think, has to be part of it. And that trust or low trust is the very definition of a really bad relationship.
Exactly. And so you can imagine people who you have a relationship with who don't ever look like they understand your emotions.
Right.
Who seem to have no ability to feel anything along with you, who don't make any effort to manage your emotions in a positive way. That is, to make you feel comfortable, to make you relax, to make you feel good about yourself and the interaction. Yeah, that's probably not somebody you're going to trust very much. And yes, you're right. It's not someone you're going to probably find it easy to establish a relationship with them.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I completely appreciate it. And I'll look forward to all of the future work that you're doing in emotional intelligence.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you here in Chicago, as well as earlier in Halifax and in New Haven. It's great to see you again.
Thank you. Bye.